All right, I'm clapping. And you know why I'm clapping? We actually have names to talk about, Eddie Garrison. Names to talk about, 12 of them. In fact, the biggest draft class for the Colts in the modern draft era, which dates back to, I think, 94. That would be 7-round drafts. I think the biggest class since 92 when the draft was like 13 rounds or something like that back then. So we're going to break down all of them. Obviously, a lot of Anthony Richardson on the Friday podcast. If you missed that, check that out. We'll get and probably focus a little bit more on the other 11. Obviously, we'll still talk a lot of Anthony Richardson, but focus on the other 11 names on today's pod. So good Monday morning to you. I'm Kevin Bowen. Eddie Garrison, as always, is with me here on Kevin's Corner. Rookie minicamp coming up later this week, so looking forward to getting out there and seeing Richardson on the field in that setting. I would assume, Eddie, let's do another Monday pod next week. Maybe after that, we can kind of shift back into our later in the week sort of settings, but I feel like it'll be good to recap rookie minicamp as well. How you doing, man?
Doing well. How about you? Good weekend other than covering the draft from West 56 pretty much every week, every day?
It's funny. The draft is long, and at times it can be a bit tedious. Now, when the team you cover has 12 picks, there's not a lot of tedious moments. But I said this to Maddie quite a lot over the last week. What I love about it is how much – well, first off, I love finding out the new stories. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it's cool just learning a little bit more about these new players. But I also really enjoy how much fans crave it. Fans are just obsessed with it. And so it's nice to produce content that is then consumed by people. And, Eddie, I mean, I don't need to tell you, just look at how many people have already listened to the Anthony Richardson podcast from Friday. You know, it was probably our most listened pod in quite some time. So that just goes to show you, how much interest there is. And again, I guess we'll start here before we get into, each individual player. There should be, I think, excitement from Colts fans on this draft class. And you know why? It's not because the Colts drafted 12 dudes that could go win a decathlon tomorrow. And 12 dudes that, dominated their respective pro days and combine testing numbers and all of that. For the most part, that's been Chris Ballard's MO. I mean, yes, does this class have maybe a tick more on the relative athletic score than the others? Probably. But you know what? This has been Ballard's thing. He drafts dudes that are strong testers. When I was looking back on my mock draft, Eddie ended up getting 3 of the 9 picks right, which I'm like shocked by. But then again, I'm like, well, Ballard has kind of told us at this point what he does. If you test well and you go to the Senior Bowl and you're a team captain, you're probably on the Colts board.
Yep.
So now it's just matchup position with Round and all that. So Blake Freeland and Evan Hull were the other two besides, obviously, Richardson. But I think the reason why Colts fans should be most excited about this group, Eddie, is I see, unlike the other 6 drafts Ballard has done, I see more of a premium position of focus with the earlier picks. To me, it's the most. Obviously, Richardson speaks for itself. Like, that's a quarterback at number 4 overall. But what have I always said on this podcast? In some order, quarterback, wideout, probably left tackle if you have a right-hander, defensive end, and corner. Those are the 5 positions that stand above the rest. And look at this draft. Your first 4 picks, all at those premium spots.
Yep.
5 of your first 6, 8 of your overall 12 in the entire class are at those spots. You took 3 corners. You took a couple offensive tackles. You obviously took a quarterback. You throw a dart at an edge rusher on day 3. We have not seen that. I mean, sure, you've had moments where you've drafted premium positions in the first couple of rounds, but not to this extent. Not to this level with each of your first 4, 5 of your first 6. We're 6 years into the Ballard regime. This will be year 7. We've seen where a guard at 6 has gotten you. We see where a running back at 41 has gotten you, or a safety at 15 in Malik Hooker. We have seen that song and dance. If there's anything you can point to with Ballard's offseason approach so far that's different, it's this. It's the premium positions. He handled free agency how he always does. He handled the draft and drafting athletes like he always drafts elite athletes. Again, maybe a little bit higher here, but he always does this. To me, if you're a Colts fan, either looking for an area to be excited about or just looking for something different Ballard's done here in 2023, it's this. It is more of a premium positions. Now, Eddie, you could easily sit here and say, Well, it's because the Colts don't necessarily have answers at some of those premium positions. Sure, that's a fair assessment, and that probably is why he should have tried to do this a little bit earlier in his tenure. So I know the headline, Eddie, is an easy sort of like Colts draft elite athletes. Like that is the obvious headline from, pretty much everybody out there. And there's a lot of validity and truth to that. But again, more than that, to me, it is a premium position focus from Chris Ballard here in 2023.
Totally agree with you. And two things. You got 3 right out of 9 you mocked, right? 3 for 9?
Yeah, 3, yeah.
You'd be the leading, you'd have the top batting average on the Cincinnati Reds with that with that hit right there. I
was thinking this, and this is probably something more for you. Before the start of the draft, Richardson was probably like plus 1,000 to go to the Colts, plus 1,200?
He closed at plus 500.
Okay, closed there. So maybe, a week before the draft, you might have got him at plus 1,000, something like that, to go to the Colts. Obviously, Freeland and Hull would have been like, whatever, plus 2,000. I mean, that's just like literally a 1 out of 32 chance.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, should I have just done $10 on each of the 9 guys in the mock? And
if they went that far out, I would say yes. But
yeah, I know that is a good point. They probably don't go that.
And the second thing I wanted to bring up before we dive pick by pick here, when you look at the first 7 picks, I think 6 of the 7 are replacement for players that they lost. Obviously, you have Anthony Richardson. That was a much-needed hole at quarterback, so that was expected. And you can obviously pinpoint that to Matt Ryan, replacement, or even dating back to Andrew Luck, really. You've got Julius Brents. That is your replacement for Stephon Gilmore. Josh Downs is your replacement for Paris Campbell. Blake Freeland is the 1 pick out of the first 7 that Chris Ballard made.
Probably go Pryor or Kelly.
I guess that's true.
Of who your backup tackles were last week.
I guess that's a good point. And then I had his name down for Sports Talk Saturday night, and it's already out of my head.
Are you going to give it an effort?
I'm not going to give it an effort at the moment. Northwestern's defensive end. Go for it. Okay. I mean, you talked to him, so.
And I said to him, I go, before we get started, just give us your first and last name, because I first off, I just think that's like common courtesy to do that. Secondly, I had no idea where the hell I was going and even trying to address him. Adetomiwa Adebare.
Oh, that's spot on.
Adetomiwa Adebare.
I need to clip that off and then send it to like Google or something, so that every time it's like somebody looks up
can
how
I be
to
the robot on? Can I be the robot on YouTube? When they search it. Now he did say he likes that to be written out, so he wants Adetomiwa,
not Ade or whatever I was seeing on Twitter.
He wants that written out, but then once he talks to you in person, call him Tommy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was a very specific take, so I will abide by that. I think father Nigerian prince, I believe, at some point.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there is some history there.
So then his replacement, or he's replacing, I guess you could say, would be either Yannick Ngakoue, but I would probably err more on the side of Ben Banogu, simply because you don't expect a lot from defensive end rookies right away in their first season. And then Darius Rush is like a Brandon Faison replacement potentially, and then Daniel Scott is potentially a replacement for Rodney McLeod, or to add depth in that safety room specifically. But that's just kind of what my overall, beliefs or thoughts were when I was looking at it from like a bigger picture standpoint.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I do think Tommy will be a little bit more interior than he will be. But again, to your point, Eddie, that's almost like Curtis Brooks gone. Eric Johnson didn't do a lot for you. Mm-hmm. They went out and signed Taven Bryan. So we'll get more into that throughout pick by pick. But, again, no linebacker, no guard. We can chat about that maybe at the end. I did post 10 takeaways on our website, 1075thefan.com there on that end. So that covers a little bit more of just overall takeaways. But unless you got anything else, man, let's dive into Juju Brents.
Yeah, Juju Brents, quarterback out of Kansas State. He's an Indianapolis native, went to Warren Central High School, 6'3", 198. He was selected by the Colts in the second round at 44th overall after a couple of tradebacks. He played 46 career games with 32 starts at Kansas State from 2021 to 2022, and then at Iowa from 2018 to 2020. He compiled over 100 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 16 passes defended, 6 interceptions, and 1 forced fumble.
Just first, Eddie, and this is a tangent, you want to know why IU and Purdue are bad at football? IU very bad, Purdue mediocre.
Bad at recruiting in-state athletes.
I mean, what are we doing here? 3-star kid out of Warren Central? and he's a number 35 overall pick. Like, okay. Anyway.
DeJuan Jones?
Yeah, DeJuan Jones as well. Granted, he was a little bit more of a highly rated recruit.
Yeah.
So you traded back twice, Eddie. For what it's worth, no corners went in that 9-pick span. So clearly, if you identify, it didn't sound like they necessarily had Brents identified as the guy at 35. Ballard mentioned they had kind of a cluster of 5 or 6 guys that they liked. Michael Mayer did go at 35. Jonathan Mingo went. I know some people were high on him. A couple of edge guys went during that span as well. But I'll never forget walking to the local pro day, about a month ago, and I walk in there, and usually if you're really good and you're a local prospect, you're not working out. That's just typical. Like, local pro days more for like the day 3 undrafted guys that work out. I walk in there, and the first thing I say to myself is, whoa, who is that? And I'm talking about Brent's, because he is a tall, long, and like well-built dude. Like, weight is no issue whatsoever. And if you would have given me a piece of paper right there, Eddie, and said, what position do you think that dude plays? I would have said safety and linebacker before I said corner. 1,000%. I mean, he is legit 6'3", legit 200 pounds. And those arms, I mean, the arms are so long, and it screams Seattle corner. It screams Gus Bradley's history, all of that.
The Richard Sherman type, yeah.
Sure, exactly. I found it interesting that Gus and Chris Ballard have mentioned the Colts want to play a little bit more press. I like the sound of that. I'll probably, believe it once I see it, but I do like some of that tone. I got a lot of these questions about Brents over the weekend, especially when people saw his 40 time of 4.5. And they compared that to Rocky Scene's 40 time, or even a Quincy Wilson, I think, had a similar 40 time, and those are obviously other second-round picks.
Quincy
what
Wilson.
I think could be a separator with Brents compared to those guys, if you want to look at the testing side of it, his short area quickness is much better than those two, specifically Rock. We're talking 3-cone, even the 10-yard, the short shuttle, those sorts of things. Brent's really, really excelled there as an athlete. Obviously, the local connection speaks for itself. Favorite player was Bob Sanders growing up. He had his draft party at Birdie's in Westfield for our local crowd.
Yeah.
Great little putt-putt place right next to
Nice spot.
Grand Park. Nice spot. I know he was doing his Zoom, and in the background it had like a picture of a Westfield like bridal company. And I'm like, where in the world is he right now? And then he eventually told us. I asked him, Julius, Juju, what are we going with here? And he seemed pretty open to either, but then he ended it with, at Kansas State, they called it Juju Island. So, I feel like once I hear that, you got to go Juju, right? You think any corner has never not had an island since Revis? Maybe a few more inhabitants on some people's islands than
It's got to fit.
Does Juju Island fit?
I don't know.
He was a fun personality. I enjoyed talking with him. I mean, there are some injuries. It wasn't tremendous ball production. It wasn't like he did have some, penalties and so things like that. I'm trying to get to like reasons why he wouldn't have been, whatever, up there with Witherspoon or Christian Gonzalez. I know dropped a little bit, but up there with some of those guys of the top corners. I do find this, and maybe this is just conversations with Jack Doyle, and obviously Jack Doyle handled it pretty well. And Doyle, to be fair, wasn't a second-round pick and wasn't, initially here as an undrafted free agent. I do feel like there would be a lot of pressure playing for your hometown team. A lot of pressure. And, I think there's probably some people in the Brents family that would tell you, like, we love it, but let's not ignore just the amount of requests or just little stuff like, I have no idea where Juju Brents went to junior high, but whatever. Let's say he went to Stony Brook. Can you imagine, like, Stony Brook's coach being like, hey, man, if you got a free minute, you mind coming here after practice one day? If he's in Seattle, he's not getting any of that. And just those sorts of things you always kind of feel like you're obligated to do something on that end. Really cool, but also, that is maybe a slight nitpick or just a slight question that you would have. But he will not participate, it sounds like, fully this spring. So I think that would be the one hindrance.
Wrist injury, correct?
Yeah, wrist. He didn't participate at that local pro day as well. But he did the Senior Bowl stuff and then decided, I think, to have a procedure on the wrist. So, but we'll be full go for training camp, he said. And Eddie, if you handed me a piece of paper right now and said, Kevin, out of the 12 names most likely to start all 17 games, I think it's him.
Really?
Now, I think who I would put next on that list, we'll get to a little bit later, but I think it would be him. It's just there's such a scarcity at that position. And yeah, I think Richardson's going to play, and I think he's going to play early. But if you said, okay, here's, Max is never going to be sick ever again, that's who I would bet on. So that would be the guy that I feel like, based off positional, again, just depth chart is wild looking. I mean, you drafted 3 corners, Eddie. 3 of them. I mean, that's a big number. And they're all outside guys, which is might be a slight nitpick there. I would like to have seen a slot go with that. So anything else on Juju?
Not that I can add. Round 3, the Colts finally went wide receiver somewhat early outside of Michael Pittman Jr. in the draft. They selected a guy that I wanted them to draft in round 2 that fell out to round 3, Josh Downs, wide receiver from North Carolina, had over 200 receptions in his collegiate career and 34 games played with 23 starts and almost hit the 2,500-yard plateau with 22 touchdowns.
Eddie, I want to add a little context around those numbers. 195 catches in the last 2 years, and he missed 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
Those are big, big numbers. I mean, North Carolina hosted Notre Dame this year. It was one of those games where, Notre Dame, of course, is, lost to freaking Ohio State and Marshall, and you're like, boy, this is where the season just could unravel. It's one of those where it's like, this is a tough team, it's on the road, blah, blah, blah. And Downs was banged up coming into that game. I think he might have missed the 2 previous. And I remember just listening to various Notre Dame podcasts, and they'd have North Carolina people on, and they were like, this is a huge storyline for this week. Like, if Josh Downs plays or not. Huge. And then I think he scored on the first 4th down of the game in the red zone, and I was like, of all the people, why are we not accounting for him? Very loud. Rosie was confused and whatever. I wanted wide out on day 2. And what did I want? I wanted a point guard. I didn't want power forwards. Point guard. Said that quite often. And I went with Tyler Scott in the mock. And Tyler Scott, who actually fell a little bit.
He went in the 5th, didn't he?
I think 4th to Chicago, if I'm not mistaken.
No, that was the other Cincinnati receiver. I forget where.
Scott went to the Bears. I thought Mark Dykton was talking to me about that. But nonetheless.
Oh, yeah, he did.
4?
Yeah.
When I said point guard, what I mean by that is you need more of a speed guy in the slot. And I think you can look at 2 flavors of speed. You can look at the straight line speed, or you can look at kind of the lateral jitterbug speed. Downs tested just fine in the 40, but I think Downs is more of your lateral jitterbug guy. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm going to put my foot in the ground, and I have created 2.5 feet of separation, or whatever. I've created 9 inches of separation, and now all of a sudden, that's a window for my quarterback to get me the ball on 3rd and 5, and now it's a 7-yard gain, and we've moved the chains. Chad Henry, Colts area scout, always has some hilarious analogies after draft picks. He called Downs the human chain mover. He called him a hiccup because he's as fast as a hiccup. And
was this on with the next pick?
It hasn't come out yet. This is at the press conferences on Saturday night after the picks. And he basically said, when you have the hiccups, the defensive player needs to go to the bench and get some water to try and rest because he can't guard Josh Downs. It's pretty good. Eddie, this is probably like scar tissue as someone that has watched the Colts play a whole lot of football in my life. But I think you can probably speak to this too. Eddie, you could very quickly name slot receivers that have absolutely killed the Colts over the years. Welker, Edelman. How about Hunter Renfrow? I swear he did it every time the Colts played the Texans, and he hasn't done it yet in a Colts uniform. I don't even know if he's still here anymore. Kiki Kuti, when he was a Texan.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these types of dudes kill the Colts, and it's such a huge element to an offense on 3rd down and in the red zone when you get in these one-on-one man situations and a team says, you're in the slot, I'm not putting my best corner on you. I feel like whatever, we're going to be able to bracket you, or we're going to be able to just, really be physical with you. And Downs showed in college he can be super effective in this role. Reggie Wayne, by all accounts, was obsessed with Josh Downs throughout the process, wanted him badly. Ballard says that they tried to trade up for him for about 30 minutes. As well. And I've mentioned this. I don't want Isaiah McKenzie as a slot receiver for the Colts. I think you want Isaiah McKenzie in the gadget role. He's too inconsistent to be a slot every down wide out for you. Again, I think Josh Downs can be your slot of the future. A little bit of punt return history. Had some drops as a sophomore. That number really improved this season. Dad played in the NFL for 7 years.
So did his uncle. He was a Pro Bowler. Drew Bly.
I thought his sister married as Dre Bly.
What?
His sister married Dre Bly.
Would be his uncle, right?
Brother-in-law, right? If your sister married.
Oh, I thought it was uncle.
Maybe it is uncle. I don't know what the family tree is. He is somehow related to Dre Bly.
Uncle. Dre.
It is uncle? Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, obviously there's a lot of NFL history from his father and then people that he is with right now. So,
his sister played soccer at Kennesaw State.
Ooh,
if you got that, yeah.
Woo-hoo. They almost upset Xavier in round one of the tournament. So I am a fan of this Downs pick. And again, in and out, quickness, lateral guy. I like the thinking here. And I think, I know a lot of people wanted to do the T.Y. Hilton thing, and I even asked him about T.Y. Hilton. I saw someone make a really good point that I think he's less T.Y. Hilton and a little bit more like Rondale Moore, like. Again, some of that lateral stuff. And he can do some things with the ball in his hand. Not like, I don't act like it's just let him touch it and boy, he's going to, take it 80 yards. But he can do some things post-catch, which you like as well. So I think it's the perfect type of complement to what you have in that room. And it was much needed. You got to diversify that room. So pick 79 to round out day 2. It was Josh Downs.
In the 4th round, the Colts had a pair of selections, 106th to 110th. We start at 106, and this is where Kevin got his mock correct for the player. This is his second pick, Blake Freeland, tackle from Brigham Young University, 6'8", 302, big boy.
Big boy. The thing that stood out to me the most about Freeman, Eddie, that I liked was he's got over a dozen starts at right tackle and left. That's very important to me when you look at projecting guys in the middle-ish rounds, particularly when you look at the Colts depth chart. We'll do the exercise like we do every year in July, the most indispensable Colts.
Yep.
It's something that we do each and every year. If you were to ask me last week, make a list of the most indispensable Colts, I can make a strong argument to putting Braden Smith number 1 on that list.
Yep.
I can make a strong argument to putting Bernard Ryman in the top 5. You have nobody at tackle. And we're still projecting Ryman a little bit, I mean, it's not like an absolute slam dunk. So you need him. He kind of told a little bit of a Joe Wright story in terms of big old weight gain for him. He was a high school quarterback at one point. Great track background, great field background, I should say, when you talk track and field. 2,000 calorie protein shake sort of thing, always eating, always working out. He said he didn't have a ton of interest, he felt like, from the Colts. But this is kind of in the Ryman mold. And if you're going to look at these two, and then Jake Witt we'll get to as well. But if you look at Ryman, you look at Freeland, Eddie, and Witt, they all kind of fall in the tall, long, athletic. The question is what? Can they handle power? Mm-hmm. Like that, I mean, can they handle power? So that would be the question that I would have with him. But from day one, he should be your swing tackle. And he's one injury away from maybe being needed week 1, as crazy as that sounds. So I'm good at this pick. You guys know full well. I've said it for quite some time. I don't feel like Chris Ballard has taken enough tackles in the post-Anthony Costanzo era. And this is one that is much more of a realistic shot than a guy like Jake Witt, of course, coming up in round 7.
Started 41 games last year at BYU, or in his career, I should say. 26 at left tackle, 15 at right. And he was only one of 3 players for BYU last year to start all 13 games.
It's a little bit of a Joe Haig background.
He's actually started all 13 games the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, he was really durable. I saw they got an undrafted kid. I think their right guard from BYU. We'll probably get more into the undrafted guys next week, to be honest with you. So, yeah, Blake Freeland right there at, what was that, 106, I think? Pick 106?
Pick 110. Kevin?
Well, can you go Tommy now? Because we've already done the
I cannot go Tommy yet until I get the actual name down.
Adetomiwa?
Adebare.
I think the last name is much easier than the first.
Adetomiwa Adebare.
Mm-hmm.
Out of Northwestern, 6'2", 282. This was a guy that I think Dane Brugler, Mel Kiper, Todd McShay, and countless other, Daniel Jeremiah, had this guy pegged maybe even in the late of the first round or certainly going in the second, but then he falls to the Colts in round 4 at pick 110 overall.
Yeah, I think he really lit up the combine. That's when a lot of people started to be like, whoa, tell me more about this guy. Again, everybody at this point I think knows about what he did at the combine. 284 pounds and he ran 4.49. No one's done that, I think, in 2 decades, period, no matter the position. He ran a faster 40 than Juju Brents. Can you imagine?
And Josh Downs.
Just absolutely crazy in what he was able to do and just athletically. I think something that I found interesting is, when I saw he was drafted in round 4, Eddie, I thought to myself, boy, was the production that bad at Northwestern for him? And then you look at his production, and it's actually pretty good. His tackle for loss number, pretty good. His sack number, pretty good. I think it's 12 sacks, 24 tackles for loss. And again, I think he's more of an interior guy. Now, I know 6'1" probably scared some teams away, and it doesn't sound like they feel like he's got an ideal position, but it was surprising to me that he fell to this point of the draft. I guess he has no true position. But again, defensive tackle depth is a question. Grover Stewart, I believe, is entering a contract year. To me,
he's in the final year of his contract, correct?
To me, he deserves an extension before the start of the year, but that's just me. But it sounds like 3 techniques, so that would be more the Buckner, backup than anything. He said his technique needs work, but he likes the interior, says a lot less thinking. Feels like his get off and kind of his motor are 2 things. Pretty durable over the last couple of seasons as well. So. This is a guy that just depth along the D-line, and it definitely, checks in terms of wasn't an absolute must, but Taven Bryant's on a 1-year deal. I understand why the Colts made this selection.
How close is he in comparison to Dio Adengbo?
Well, the biggest difference would be just sheer length, height and length. But I do, to your point, Eddie, I would probably say, because, the Colts have these guys. What is Tyquan Lewis exactly? What is Dio exactly? What is Tommy exactly? I think he's probably the most interior of the bunch. He really didn't sound too enamored with rushing off the edge. And at 6'1", 280...
He played a lot of interior, I think, too, at Northwestern.
I get that. I get what his thinking is there. So, again, throw him into the D-line mix for depth. And
is Northwestern 4-3 or 3-4? Do you know? Or
I don't. I would assume 4-3. Some would argue it doesn't really matter. They suck in general.
Well, their defenses have typically been good. It's the offense.
Yeah. How about 4 drafted Northwestern Wildcats, and they won 1 game last year?
And 2 of them to the Indianapolis Colts.
2 of them. I know. We need to get Pat Fitzgerald on the show, don't we?
I guess so. Selected 5th in the 5th round by the Colts. 158th overall of the 2023 NFL Draft. Safety, Daniel Scott from Cal. Started 28 games in his 49-game career at Cal. Over 200 tackles, some tackles for loss, and 7 interceptions with 1 return for a touchdown.
Did we miss Darius Rush?
Maybe I did.
If we're going in the exact order.
Yes, I did.
Of the picks.
Totally. Yeah, my bad there. My bad.
Technical. There's a lot of round 4 and round 5ers. So I think he was 20 spots earlier, right? 138.
Yeah, 138. Yep, the corner out of South Carolina.
Eddie, remember that piece of paper that you handed me at the start of the podcast saying, okay, which Colt is the best bet to start 17 games?
This was your bet here?
Juju was number 1. Darius Rush would be number 2.
Interesting. Why?
So much to do with the position he plays. So much to do with it. Are you going to tell me right now in Sharpie it's Dallas Flowers? Are you going to tell me in Sharpie it's Isaiah Rodgers? And this is probably more of a when you play 3 corners. And you know the advantage Darius Rush is going to have over Juju Brents? He's going to be healthy theoretically for the spring.
Good point.
So he'll get, when you talk about spring, and I guess this is a little bit of a let's get outside of the draft for just a second. The Colts have their rookie minicamp this weekend. They'll get into the offseason program, so rookies will then be in with veterans starting next Monday. You'll get, I think it's 2 weeks of just kind of that slow integration of positional drills, maybe some 7-on-7. And then, like, mid-May, I could probably pull up the calendar and get the exact date. May 23rd, okay? So May 23rd, they'll begin OTAs. They'll have 3 that week. May 30th, they'll have another 3. June 6th, they'll have another 3. One of those weeks, actually, they'll have 4. That'll get them to 10. So they'll get 10 OTA sessions. And just a reminder, OTAs are voluntary, but you show up if you care about football.
Yep.
And they are 11 on 11 without full pads. But your coaches can be out there. So they're the closest thing you'll get to full pads at all in the offseason until training camp. So you have 10 of those sessions, and then June 13th, 14th, and 15th, a 3-day minicamp. So you have 13 times between now and Grand Park where you'll have an 11 on 11 90-minute practice. So that means for Darius Rush, he'll get 13 chances that Juju Brents won't get, if you want to look at it like that. So the frame and the speed should be of no concern. I mean, we're talking legit 6'1", 6'2", ran 4.36. He's a former wideout, which would lead me to think he's got good ball skills. I know he didn't have a ton of interceptions at South Carolina. I believe he was the cornerback of the week at the Senior Bowl. Was not penalized very often at all. I think the reasons why he fell, not a great tackler, was, I think, a big thing on that end. But I was surprised. I mean, Ballard mentioned he was kind of a round 4 guy. I know some people thought he was better than the other South Carolina corner, Cam Smith. Is that it?
Yep.
So, yeah, he's one that I would put up there, Eddie, just because, again, more to do with the position than anything.
Very athletic background, too. Played football, baseball, basketball, golf, and track in high school. He is a state champion in the high jump and triple jump.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Track backgrounds galore.
Yeah. I skipped over him. Now we're to him. Daniel Scott.
Daniel Scott, special teamer. I thought it was a hair early for this sort of thinking, but I mean, I guess you're giving Brian Mason something to work with in the sense of new special teams coach. But this is a dude that, to me, is very much a core special teamer from day one.
Also seems like a smart guy when you major in sociology and earned a graduate certificate in business administration.
Yeah, 6-minute Zoom with him. I got that impression that he's a pretty intelligent individual. I think he played a lot of spots within Cal's defense. Cal actually had a decent defense. 28 career starts, again. Stop me if you've heard this before. Senior Bowl captain. He's old, Eddie. Turns 25 in October. Old. That's usually what you get out of the BYU crew.
And we don't call them old, Kevin. We call them seasoned.
Very smart, boy. You sound like Daniel Scott's agent. Did sound like not the most sound tackler.
Because if he's old, then I'm approaching old. Fast.
Really good short area testing numbers. I had safety in the 7th round of my mock, of the positional mock that we did. Positional mock actually looked really good.
I was about to ask you, how'd that one do in terms of numbers there?
Positional mock started 4 for 4.
I know.
That was, and you and I were texting about it, that was quarterback, corner, wide out.
I even put it on Twitter. I said, hey, Kevin Moe, you should have stuck with the positional mock.
For a second here. Come on now. Chris Bauer did say at the Combine that one year that he reads, not just listens, he also reads.
He went freaking Bowen over here writing about my need for wide receivers.
The reason I put safety in there is Rodney McLeod. I don't say this I have this on great authority, but it does sound like it's no slam dunk he's coming back. Still a free agent. Who knows if he'll ever play football again. And then Julian Blackmon is in a contract year. So, you still have Rodney Thomas. Obviously, you still have Blackmon. Of course, you have Nick Cross. But I did think safety at some point. But to me, Daniel Scott, before you get necessarily to the safety stuff, I think you start him as a potentially a core special teamer.
Next pick for the Indianapolis Colts in round 5. I think this is the final 5th round pick, if I'm not mistaken. No, it's not. It's second to last. He has ties here to the state of Indiana.
Yes.
His father, legendary coach at Indiana University.
Grandfather.
Yeah. My apologies. Grandfather. Will Mallory, tight end. Miami.
Yeah, his dad, I think, is a longtime special teams coach in the NFL. His uncle, Kurt, has been at Indiana State for several years as their head coach. And Bill Mallory, to your point, Eddie, Probably the best.
I had them all just stuck in my head. I couldn't remember which one was where.
Oh my gosh, you should have seen me at first, like try and figure out the family tree here. You know, played his high school quarterback, Will Mallory, was Gus Bradley's son.
Wow.
If you want to go a step further, Jacksonville is where they were residing at the time, and of course, Gus was, the head coach of the Jags back then. When I saw the tight end pick, I thought, okay, no shock there. But again, Eddie, this skill set, kind of like slot at corner, doesn't necessarily match up with my thought about tight end going into the draft. Mallory ran the fastest 40 of any tight end at the combine. When I see him, I think more Kylan Granson than I do Jack Doyle, Mo Alley Cox.
He's not really much of an inline blocker.
No, and so this is where I'm a little bit head scratchy, just like, okay, I know Granson hasn't done enough to say you don't touch that sort of skill set, but it's just kind of like, what are they going to do at tight end? I think did we have a question on Mo Alley Cox on Twitter? Okay, so let's hold off on maybe going there. But again, he had a really nice yards per catch average at Miami, 115 catches there, Senior Bowl, team captain.
Former track.
There you go. And I always think this when you get into deep position, depth positions in a draft. I'm always like, in a normal year, where would that guy have gone? Like in a normal tight end year, is Will Mallory a third-round pick? Those are kind of always thoughts that I have when you do end up drafting depth at a position. So let's hold off on getting into tight end and that depth chart until Twitter questions.
I thought you were right. I thought it was Kurt Mallory. It's Doug.
Kurt's at Indiana State, right?
Doug is his uncle. He is.
There's multiple.
Yeah, he is. And this player bio at the Colts sent us. He's reportedly the coach at Indiana State.
Is he
Doug.
coaching with Kurt?
I don't know.
Could have sworn Kurt Mallory, head coach for the Sycamores. But
okay,
if I was looking into Indiana State football, again, Matty Bowen would probably say we need to reevaluate.
He is currently the head coach. So, you may want to alert whoever sent these player bios out that you got something right that they didn't.
If it was the first time I've ever made a mistake, that would certainly be not true. So, all good on that end.
Last fifth-round pick for the Indianapolis Colts, the second of the 4 Northwestern Wildcats drafted this year. Evan Hull, another player that you had mocked in your mock draft to the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, had him mocked. Again, pass-catching running back was what I was thinking, and Hull checks that box. Interestingly enough, Eddie, when you think pass-catching running back, I think we just think speed merchant, speed demon. Hull is not necessarily that. He tested better than he plays. Now, to be fair to him, I watched Northwestern. Have you ever thought, watching Northwestern, that anyone is fast on their football team?
No, this guy's just physical.
No.
Tough, gritty.
He's like, yeah, and I know we're getting into such Northwestern stereotypes, but he is kind of that. Like,
he's going to bite your kneecap off.
When you watch him, I feel like he's just got those little, like, powerful legs and just kind of a churner in that realm. But again, he did test pretty well. But don't think of him as like just pure jitterbug out of the backfield.
Former wrestler.
Really high. Oh, that watching him play, that definitely checks. 88 catches the last 2 years. Those are really high numbers. He also ran for 2,000 yards.
Yeah.
So it's not like he was just purely this third down guy. Now, it's a lot to say, hey, day 3 rookie, come be the third down back for an NFL team in year 1. But you know what? It can happen. And Eddie, think back to the Eagles this year. Miles Sanders, sure. But Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott played some big roles for them. Gainwell especially.
I was about to say, he seems like the Kenneth Gainwell role in this Colts offense.
And after Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss, just flip a coin on who you want to round out that running back room. Is it Darrington Evans, who they signed a few weeks ago? Is it Deion Jackson? Like, I know they have a couple undrafted kids coming in here. So Ballard saw him play against Wisconsin. No shock there.
Yeah.
He had 4 catches for 62 yards in that game. So he had a big game, out of the backfield. He spoke highly of special teams. He kind of said as he grew more into the running back role, less special teams usage for him. So that makes sense. But, I was all for this guy entering the draft. And I think he's got a good chance to be he could possibly have a role for you early on. Someone's got to get that role. Someone's got to do it because I don't think you just want to beat Taylor into the ground in that role. And also, Jonathan Taylor, he's kind of been a bit of a liability at times on third down as a pass protector. So, Evan Hull here, rounding out I thought it was Hall originally, but Hull, Ull for him.
Like Jordan Holes?
Correct, singular. Much easier name than
Correct.
his.
But from the pronunciation standpoint.
Yes, much easier name than his college teammate.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, at rookie minicamp later this week, my alma mater will be represented.
I saw that.
Toriano Clinton, he set the record for almost every rushing record in the book for the Greyhounds.
Of University of Indianapolis, for those unfamiliar.
Yeah.
He's on a tryout, correct?
Correct, yeah. He was invited to rookie minicamp.
So we should probably kind
He's
of
a running back,
behind the curtain how rookie minicamp works. Again, just rookies on the field. Your attempt there is to try and create some 11-on-11 action. Well, the Colts had 12 draft picks. They'll have, another 12 undrafted free agents? That's 24. You obviously need some depth pieces. So basically, teams are allowed to bring in, I think it's like 20-ish tryout guys. And typically, Eddie, every year, they will keep one or two tryout guys and cut one or two of the undrafted free agents. So, good luck on that end. If I'm not mistaken, he was at the local pro day.
He was. He was at their local pro day. Yeah. He was at the Bengals pro day.
Okay.
So and the Bears.
Look at that. Oh, wow.
Yeah, he got 3 of them.
He got a little bit of everything on that end.
Back to who the Colts drafted in round 6. He's playing the Leo position. It's Titus Leo, defensive end from Wagner.
How fitting is that? This dude's kind of got a crazy background. First off, it's Wagner, 4th NFLer, I think, ever from Wagner. The Colts actually have one of them on their roster, and Chris Williams. He's got a little bit of an EJ Speed position variety background. Oh, he played safety. Oh, he played wideout. He played linebacker. He's only been edge rusher for 2 years. Now, I would say the first thing that jumped out to me was this, Eddie.
It was his only Division I offer, too.
Was Wagner?
Yeah.
God, and they're what, FCS, something or other?
Mm-hmm.
When you see the small school kids get drafted on day 3, usually what it is, like Ashton Doolin, for example. I know he wasn't drafted, but, he was an undrafted kid. He put up, video game numbers at Malone. That was the college he went to. When you see the small school kids, it's just unbelievable how many touchdowns or yards. To your point about the UIndy kid.
Mm-hmm.
Titus Leo had 13 sacks. I'm like, what? I'm like, just last year, right? That was my first thought when I saw him. I was like, wait, this doesn't check. So it is interesting. Now, again, he only was an edge rusher for 2 years. So that's worth noting. But 13 sacks for him. He did have a big tackle for loss number. I think it was 40.
Yes, 40.
So that's obviously a big number.
Had an interception and blocked 3 extra points.
It sounded like East-West Shrine game is where he kind of put himself on the map a little bit there. This has been an issue for the Colts, I would say, dating back to the start of the Chris Ballard era. The Colts have lacked a speed edge rusher. I guess Ngakoue gave you a little bit of it for a year, but they just don't have a lot of I know Kwity Paye tested great. I don't consider Paye like a speed rusher. I probably consider him a little power first, and then can kind of get into his speed. If you're gonna have a dozen draft picks, this would be a must for me every year. At some point, you throw a dart at an edge rusher. You just do it, no matter who you are. Every team should be doing this, but the Colts especially, again, considering the issues that they have had off the edge. So we'll see if it works. Dart at a Wagner product here on day 3. And something that should be noted, because I did hear this a lot this week. Why 9 picks on day 3? Why? It's a Ballard MO. I think Ballard thinks the draft is a crapshoot, so throw as many darts at the board. Again, I'm probably more of you're at the point right now where you need more high-end talent, so take chances. I would rather have limited quantity, hopefully better quality. But I see where he's coming from on this. And lastly, I think it's worth noting, the practice squad changes, I think, are a big reason why Ballard's more open to this. It's a bigger practice squad. You can bump them up for a few games. In college football now, you can play the 4 games and you can still redshirt.
Mm-hmm.
In the practice squad, you kind of do that. You get bumped up, 3 times, and you can still go back to the practice squad. So I think that's how Ballard looks at it is, if you look at the Colts week 1 practice squad from last year, of the 16 guys, I bet over half of them played in the game. So that's, I think, what some of this thinking is here with that. And while it's on my mind, before we get to the 2 7th-round guys, why is Ballard obsessed with athletes? We've heard him talk about, it's the stuff you can't teach and provides a higher ceiling. He would argue it also provides a higher floor just because they're so darn athletic they can only fail so much.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also something along the lines of the game is now being played more in space. Your linebacker position looks a whole lot different than it looked 10 years ago. And your safeties are not necessarily the Cam Chancellors. They're more of cover guys. So I think what Ballard's thought is the game is played more in space. 7-on-7 world is slowly infiltrating the NFL world. I'd rather have athletes that can make some plays when they're on islands. So, yeah.
It's a good point. It explains why almost everyone has a RAS score over 8.5.
I think marrying the RAS with a little bit more college production would be something I would like to see.
Yep, me too.
It's tough to achieve that. I do think this year's class, more than others, had a little bit more college production. Now, it's not like you're seeing first-team All-Americans littered throughout this group. Hell, I don't even know how many necessarily like first-team All-Conference guys you see littered across this group. Certainly your quarterback it is not that. So it's finding a little bit more of that balance with that. But I do think, like in Downs' case, he certainly brought very nice college production. Brent's started 2 years on a really quality team, and I assume he was an all-conference type of guy. So, yeah.
The second to last pick the Colts made was at cornerback Jalen Jones out of Texas A&M. Selected him with the 221st overall pick. Started 32 games, all 32 games even, at Texas A&M.
Yeah, highly rated recruit coming out of high school. I think a lot of people thought safety. I think some NFL teams even thought, could he be a little bit more into the safety realm? Why did he fall? Very slow 40, north of 4.5. Some people thought a little bit too grabby, inconsistent tackler. Really wasn't targeted much at all in 2022. So he was had some.
Yeah, to your point, he was the second recruit in Texas in 2020. Overall, and that's pretty. When you consider Texas, that's
saying something.
Yeah.
And of course, Jimbo Fisher had those big time recruiting classes.
Yeah.
When you look at the three corners, Eddie, 2 out of the SEC, and then Brent's was on a team where that conference throws it a ton. So I like that thought. I would have liked to have seen more of a slot out of these trio. Kenny Moore's on a contract year. Some people are like, "Oh, Julian Blackman should play slot." Well, Julian Blackman's in a contract year, so. I just think it's important to try and find that future there. But, out of these three corners, man, 2 making the 53?
I would have to say yes, right?
Obviously, one of those 2 is going to have to help you out on special teams if they want to make it. But it's an opportunity more so than anybody. More so than any other position, I should say.
He played both ways in high school. Was a receiver as well as playing safety. Also lettered in track.
Per usual. Why don't these people play golf? Darius Rush played golf. Darius Rush played 5 sports in high school. One of them is golf. That's why I'm also high on him. I want to talk golf with him.
I know. I mentioned that in there. Now I heard your conversation with Joel Erickson this morning.
Uh-huh.
This guy was the most intriguing selection in his eyes. That is Jake Witt, the tackle from Northern Michigan. Another big boy, 6'7", 302 pounds. He started all 22 games of his career at Northern Michigan just in 2 seasons. Former tight end, and then was moved to tackle, very similar to Bernard Reitman.
What are the Colts telling us about directional schools in Michigan and former basketball tight enders that turn out to be offensive tackles for him? Is this Joe Wright's new favorite Colt?
I have to ask him.
Is this Bernard Ryman's new favorite Colt? Where was Ryman? Was Ryman Central? He was Central.
Yes,
right?
He was Central Michigan.
Joe was Western, and now we have Northern. So where's the Eastern Michigan offensive lineman next year that has a basketball background?
Let's start researching now, Kevin. Get ahead of it.
Let's see what his RAS score is. The Jake Witt story is pretty darn cool. 2018, Eddie. He's a basketball player at Michigan Tech. He was the Upper Peninsula Mr. Basketball.
Oh, the upper quartile.
Jim Irsay had to sign off on this. You know that your state's big when you have a section of your state that has a Mr. Basketball. or you have a part of the state that's so isolated from everything else that you have to do that. So he goes to Michigan Tech, plays basketball in 2018, stops playing, transfers to Northern Michigan. He's just an average student in 2019. Just you and me, Eddie, walking around campus. 2020, he decides, I'm going to go back and play football. Okay. Jake, what's your football history? Oh, well, I played 8-man football in high school my junior year.
While I was being valedictorian in my class.
Is he really valedictorian as well?
Yeah.
My gosh, this story gets better and better. So he initially is a tight end, and then boom, 2021 season, they're playing Ferris State. That would be the eventual national champs, Ferris State. You're doing the V.
The Division II?
Division II. Thank you for that. Yeah, they did not beat Alabama or Georgia. I thought you were doing like a Fresno Valley V there.
I hate Ferris State so much.
I was going to say, they've got to be a rival of UND.
Not really a rival, but they're just so good at everything.
So you're jealous.
Yes.
All of a sudden, during the middle of the game, offensive linemen get hurt. Coaches come up to him, and boom, here's jersey number 65. Jake, you're playing tackle. And in that process, he put on about 40 pounds over the last 18 months, and he will be a dart at the board for an athletic tackle that really I don't even think was like that great of a player, to be totally honest with you. I think it was a very like up and down experience, I guess as you would expect at the Division II level. But Chris Ballard nearly fell out of his chair watching his workout on film. Ballard's like, I almost drafted him purely off the workout. So,
did you mention he was a wide receiver in high school?
Yeah, I guess you should mention that. Yeah, wide out, and then tight end initially at Northern Michigan, and then again grew into that tackle. Tony Sperano Jr., the O-line coach for the Colts, went there for a private workout, so it worked him out. And yeah, the Colts are taking a chance. And I mean, this is kind of like the new tight end basketball player. You know, just find the 6'8", 300-pound dude that's uber athletic and see what you can do with them. And Eddie, let's not forget the Shane Steichen background. It's Jordan Mailata, right?
Yeah.
The Eagles guy?
Yeah.
A rugby player. They took him in, round 6 or round 7? Mm-hmm. He's turned out to be really, really good.
He's got a big payday, didn't he?
Yeah. So, again, that is some of the thinking here with this sort of selection. And this screams practice squad, right?
You would hope.
I mean, him and Titus Leto scream practice squad.
Yeah.
Of just, they haven't either played football very long, they haven't played that position very long. In Witt's case, you need a lot more to develop body-wise. In Leo's case, you need to fine-tune a lot more pass rushing. This just screams redshirt year. And if you're going to do the 12-pick thing, this is how you do it. Like, this is what you should do. And if you're going to take projects, take them at positions that matter. And in Leo's case and Witt's case, those positions matter.
Hey, Kev, guess what? You lettered in track.
Unbelievable. And it's all these discus, right?
Sprints, relays, and throws.
Javelin. And
you did 100 meters, 200 meters, shot put, discus, and long jump. Oh, by the way, he graduated with a degree in applied exercise science and health and also received his certification to be a personal trainer.
Ho-hum.
So if you need somebody to be a trainer on the field, there you go.
You got it. All right, you got anything else, or should we get into Twitter questions?
Let's get into Twitter questions. We got a handful to get to. Heavy Horseshoes up first. Hey, Kev, question for the pod. With no linebackers selected in the draft, does this speak volume to the progress of Shaq Leonard or the lack of depth of linebackers in the draft? Thanks for taking my questions and doing the pod. Haven't missed an episode since I started listening back in 2019, and it was also the main reason why I started a Twitter account.
God, thank you for that. Boy, that makes me feel very
nice
happy
and warm and fuzzy
on this Monday morning here. Yeah, I think it's got to be viewed as somewhat positive. It has to be viewed as somewhat positive on that front. Now, I do think this, in regards to Leonard, how do you truly, truly know until he gets on the field? You know, that is something that I think you have to keep in mind. So, EJ Speed is a name we've talked about a whole lot, and he's a guy that, of course, I think he's going to play a big role for you, and it could be a huge role if, Leonard isn't ready to go. And we had Joel Erickson on this morning. Eddie, you mentioned that. Joel, I believe the biggest undrafted free agent signing bonus is the Houston linebacker. Smaller guy, like kind of more of the mold. Donovan Mooten, I believe I'm saying that right. So he comes from Houston. It's a great opportunity. Like JoJo Doman last year, a great opportunity for an undrafted linebacker to make the team. But I think it's got to be viewed in somewhat of a positive light on the Leonard front.
I would agree with you there. I think the guy that New England selected, I can't remember if it was in the 5th round maybe, He was a smaller school guy, very similar to Shaq in that regard. Freaky athlete with insane production. I thought that was a guy that they would have gone after. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, I mean, it was thought to be a pretty weak linebacker class in general. So Ballard said they had a couple identified, but did not decide to go that route.
Yim is up next. Where do you stand on when Anthony Richardson should start? Some people say start him day one. Others say sit him out for a year. I ride the line between both. He needs starting reps, but you also don't want to kill his confidence. Maybe start him late in the season.
I'm baptism by fire. I am baptism by fire. And I could be wrong.
So is Jim Irsay. He said that to you guys, what was that, Saturday?
Yeah, Irsay had kind of hinted at that, and then I was like, I got to sneak in one more question. I was like, Jim, how important do you think it is for Anthony Richardson to play as a rookie? And that's when he kind of went, much deeper into that. I understand the confidence question, and I would counter with this. And this might be too harsh, Eddie. So go ahead. People can heavily disagree with me. If I'm worried about hurting your confidence, then I don't think you're wired the right way to succeed at this level.
Yep.
Might be too harsh. He's 21 years old. He has 13 starts. I understand the reasoning in sitting him. But I just think this dude needs game reps. And maybe I look at Trey Lance, and obviously people can counter with other people that have sat and have played great, but they, to me, have a lot more college experience. They have a lot more throws. Richardson, to me, Eddie, where he struggles is like the 3 and 5 step, kind of the quick hitter stuff, which in practice is so much different than a game. I mean, you can't be hit, period, at all. And just timing in a game, I think is different than timing and practice and those sorts of things. Irsay and Steichen certainly sound like they're open to him playing and playing early. So again, if I were a betting man on May 1st, I would say that he would play or start the opener. I could be dead wrong, but that's my thought right now. And also, if you really care about winning, do you feel like there's any competitive advantage to playing him early and catching teams off guard? I guess if you inserted him midseason, you'd still be catching teams off guard, quote unquote, with that. I had someone, I forget who the name was, DM me some great research on quarterbacks that start in today's NFL that had really low completion percentages at some point in college and over time have made this jump to being acceptable above average accuracy guys. And it was really good. And a lot of quarterbacks on that list that maybe we wouldn't think of, like throwers.
Uh-huh.
And the question that I had, again, glass half full would say this. You don't need Richardson to get to Phillip Rivers' Drew Brees completion percentage. You just need him to get to 62 or 64. Yeah. And because he's going to hit enough big plays with his arm, and he's certainly going to hit big plays with his legs. You don't need to be 10 for 80 down the field for a touchdown drive. You should be more of a big play offense. The glass half empty would say this. When those guys made their accuracy jumps, a lot of it still occurred in college. Can Richardson do that in the NFL? Year 1 to year 2. We always hear that. How big of a jump do you make from year 1 to year 2? Year 2 for Anthony Richardson is literally going to be playing in the NFL. Year 2 for 98% of quarterbacks that get drafted is still in college. So it's an easier environment theoretically because you're playing against competition that's not as on the even ground as you are. And it's a little bit more familiar. You obviously aren't 21 years old playing in the NFL. So that's the question of, can Richardson make the jump in a professional setting? Because a lot of those guys started to make their jumps, I should say, in college settings versus NFL settings. Shameless plug, we'll have Anthony Richardson's quarterbacks coach, Will Hewlett. He's going to join us tomorrow on our morning show, Kevin and Query, 7 a.m. Tuesday morning here in Indy.
What time is he on?
Joining us at 7 a.m., but he'll join us at some point. I would guess sometime in the 8 o'clock hour.
What kind of host are you?
I know. I don't know.
I'm just kidding. You've got 20 hours until your show, so you're good. Wake Spike is up next. Hey guys, let me start off saying I'm sorry to Eddie for not hitting the Stroud bet. It's okay. I did hit Anthony Richardson. That's how I knew the odds closing at plus 500. did hit on that. I showed KB the receipt on that one.
You did. Money, baby.
Anyway, last year my brother and I got row 1 on the field seats on the field for $100 for the last game against Houston. We even got on the red zone. How much of that, or how much, if at all, do you think Anthony Richardson will impact seat prices?
Sure. Yeah. I think it will. You know, I mean, the whole ticket prices and seat prices I always kind of find interesting. You know, when you're bad, like the Colts were last year, what do? You just take a chunk of your tickets and sell them to some ticketing company. And let them deal with it. You know, you can manipulate attendance numbers. But, I mean...
Oh, yeah, duh. I mean, the Reds do it every day.
We said this on Friday's pod, man. I mean, how? The Colts were boring as hell last year. Boring. To the answer, you don't need to watch golf on Sunday. You just watch the Colts from 2022.
Hey.
Boring as hell.
Did you just call golf boring?
Well, yeah, I can be honest. They will at least be a more entertaining product. And you know what, Eddie? True TV for the AFC South, you might need to bump the AFC South up to TNT or TBS. They're no longer true. They got fun young quarterbacks. Curious quarterbacks, maybe more than anything. We'll see how fun it is. And you know what? I also say this. You know, we drank mayo and coffee on our morning show last week, and I'd like to think that our sacrifice, it was as utterly horrific as you could imagine. I'd like to think our sacrifice led to the Colts passing on Will Levis.
You think so?
By the way, should I believe Jim Irsay saying Anthony Richardson would have been the pick at number 1 by the Colts?
No.
So you're telling me you would have taken him at number 1, but you weren't willing to trade up from 4 to 3?
But they would have. That's what Ballard said. They called Arizona. And
Arizona's honest with them? Wouldn't Arizona say we want the best trade package possible? What are you willing to offer?
Well, it is a rookie GM, Kevin. Haven't you seen Draft Day?
Touche. Would the Colts have taken Levis at 4?
I don't know. He's more like Bo Callahan to me.
You know, I did have a few Titans fans in my mentions saying I'd rather have a draft with Peter Skoronski and Will Levis than have Anthony Richardson.
Oh.
Hey, we're going to get a chance to compare him, Stroud, everything. But yes, Wake Spike, to your point, I know next year's schedule includes Bryce Young on it, right? But that might be a road game. I think it's at Carolina. Yeah, I mean, it's... How many times have I said this, Eddie? It is hope. It's injection of life. It is... I'm going to do a winners and losers article coming up from the Colts draft. Mm-hmm. And who is the biggest winner? Colts fans. The organization. And I mean that in all seriousness and zero sappiness out of it. You have told your franchise and your fan base, we are trying to build a long-term winner for the first time since Andrew Luck retired. That is exactly 8 to 10 year run. That's what you want. Can you create that type of run? And you are trying to create that with a 21-year-old.
You know, leading up to the draft, you and I talked about a lot about how the Indiana Pacers, they have hope because of Tyrese Halliburton and Benedict Mathurin and the ascension of Miles Turner. And there was just not that same feeling when it came to the Colts. And now the drafting of Anthony Richardson has certainly changed that kind of mindset or outlook now on the franchise.
I could not agree more. Let's go with a couple more. Give me that Mo Alley Cox one, wherever that one is. Let's ask the Mo Alley Cox one. And then wasn't there an undrafted free agent one?
Yes.
Let's go with those two before we round it out.
Chris and Tanner submitted this very similar question. Hey, Kevin, hope all is well. Could you give your thoughts on the future of Mo Alley Cox? I feel like we should have tried trading him for an additional late round pick. That kind of goes into a text that I got from a friend, Alec. He was asking, are we surprised that we didn't see a veteran traded on draft night like we have with Chris Ballard in the past?
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, Eddie, I don't know if anybody really got traded around the NFL.
Besides DeAndre Swift, yeah, I can't think of anybody.
On day 3 was what I was getting. I don't know. Maybe Swift was day 3. Now that I think about it, I kind of forget if that was day 2 or 3. They all run together. I mean, what do you trade Mo Alley Cox for? I know that sounds a bit harsh. You know, okay, tight end right now, Eddie. You've got about 4 guys for 6 guys for 4 spots, okay? Mo Alley Cox, Jelani Woods, Drew Ogletree, Kylan Granson, Will Mallory, and Pharaoh Brown. 6 guys for 4 spots. And some would argue 4 is too many tight ends. So when I look at that, I'm thinking, okay, is Will Mallory a practice squad guy? Or he's a 5th-round pick. I mean, that's not like a guarantee you could stick him to the practice squad. Mm-hmm. But isn't Mallory more Kylan Granson? Who helps you out on special teams? The thing about Mo Alley, first off, his contract is not like killing you by any means.
No.
Again, you're not getting anything better than a 7th-round pick, and that might even be wishful thinking on that front for him. And lastly, I think he brings the trait you need the most in that room right now as an inline blocker. That's the one missing ingredient to me. Like, I think you need more of an inline blocker and just more of a guy you throw out there, and you're not necessarily tipping your hand on first or second down. So that's where I look at this tight end room and think it's going to be tough to make the team. How they want to go from a skill set standpoint, how Shane Steichen wants to go from a skill set standpoint is really interesting.
Are they going to be more zone running like they were in Philly, or are they going to be more power?
Yeah, Sperano Jr. wouldn't really hint at that. I tend to think a little bit more zone, but we will see. I think they will be making some schematic changes. The Will Mallory pick, though, isn't that more Kylan Granson? So should Kylan Granson be worried? Again, I'm probably way too early on this and overthinking it.
I don't think you are. I mean, the production from him hasn't been there, and he's had the history of drops.
Yeah, and more than anything, okay, let's not debate the names necessarily. Just from a sheer number standpoint, it's 6 for 4. And it might be 6 for 3. So, and you're not cutting Jelani Woods, right?
I don't think so.
So Woods is definitely a lock. So more, it's like 5 for 2. I guess Ogletree could be a practice squad guy just because it's not like a guarantee he comes off the ACL and looks exactly like he looked last year. I guess that might be one.
And nobody really knows.
Sure, it was still practice with him. Very interesting. That might be the position group I'm most curious about, non-quarterback division.
Big Bama. Out of the undrafted free agents, who do you think has a realistic chance to make the roster or has a chance to make immediate impact on the team? Also, with the draft picks and undrafted free agents, who do you think is on alert for a surprise cut during camp?
Popular question. It's a popular one. We also just brought up, a couple of names. On that front. As far as the undrafted kids, we, again, throw the linebackers on that list. Emil Ekiyor from Cathedral, the Alabama guard, 40 starts at right guard. Will Fries has got to be a winner of this draft. So I would go here as a great opportunity to make the team. The Colts didn't they keep Wesley French initially too last year? Didn't they keep an interior undrafted guy?
I thought so.
So I'll go there. Surprise cut. Mentioned some of the tight ends. I always feel like they cut a defensive lineman that at least has a resume. That at least has done something in the league.
So DeForest Buckner?
No. So I will throw that on there. But yeah, tight end. I don't know. That one just kind of is standing out to me. I know we have some other draft-related questions. We'll get to those on next week's pod. This pod has already been pretty long. Eddie, anything else?
Can't think of anything else. I'm surprised you didn't make me go with the one that someone brings up Tiger, so we'll have to save that one, I guess.
Save the best for last, right? We'll do those next Monday on the pod. Recapping rookie minicamp. Tons of written content on 1075thefan.com. Cannot emphasize that enough. He's Eddie Garrison. I'm Kevin Bowen. Everybody have a great week. We'll talk to you on Monday.